bit crazy. And so that goes back to the idea of empowerment, though. If you find it valuable, if you find it enjoyable, if you find yourself feeling more confident, you feel more sexy doing it, then do it, you know? And don't let society stop you, and don't let society hold you back from living that fantasy. Um, I'm asking you this: haven't you ever wanted to be a vampire when you watch those shows and movies of yours? Did that inspire you to think, what if I, Carlos, was a vampire?
I think I always wanted to meet vampires. Uh,
Mm.
so
Mhm.
actually, I'm living this now. I think my fascination was into being able to pop up these questions and to go into the mind of a vampire,
Mm.
and especially those if it was a real vampire who we've lived for centuries, and
Mhm.
having all that history behind, and having someone who I could ask about something that happened 300 years ago or 200 years ago. I think it was the picking that person's brain and that knowledge, and a person who has lived so much.
That's a good point too. The longevity aspect of it, immortality. Unfortunately, as you'll see with most real vampire texts, we're not immortal. We can die just like a person. I don't claim any supernatural powers here. No, but we do have a what we will call a immortality mindset, where we don't look necessarily at the world in terms of death being a bad thing or death being the end of things. We try to say that, as long as you're living your truth, as long as you're following your purpose and doing what matters in life, death is nothing to be afraid of. It's just a change of energy, really. All this is just a shell.
Mhm. And do you? I gotta ask you this about the drinking blood. And do you do this, or other current vampires carry this practice, or not at all?
So there are blood drinkers. They're called sanguinarians. But as I said, we're still susceptible to like any human diseases. So it's not very practical. And then you have to, find a donor. It's a lot of work. It's If someone is actually interested in energy work, that's probably the better route. It's the subtle energy. Um, Even the science and when they talk about in the metaphysics of blood and whether it carries energy, a lot of blood's energy is lost the moment it leaves the human body and you don't like preserve it. It's blue inside the human body. A lot of times when it's, I think it's I think it was oxidized, something like that. It's blue, and then it loses that quality. So a lot of what you call the spiritual energy of blood is lost when it's disconnected from that person or is from away from them for too long. So I don't have any interest in drinking blood. It can be kind of symbolic of the energy transfer, but the cost to one's health and the risks involved are too great to do that. But there are vampires who partake, so I don't judge too much.
And in the United States, is there a big community of vampires currently?
That's a hard one. There is a lot of subculture in the United States, and so by extent, there's a lot of vampires. Um, New York, New Orleans, those were some of like the halos, the major scenes of the vampire scene. Um, and there was like a sort of golden age of vampires. When we talked about Blade, Blade didn't just pop out of like a vacuum. It was in ways inspired by actual real subculture and real club scenes. So they had this thing in New York called the Court of Hidden Shadows, which was interesting because it was very underground, like DIY, do-it-yourself scene of you know mainly Black and Latina vampires and goths and like and creators and artists who came together to make this community. Kind of, have you heard of like the LGBT ball scene in New York on Pose? It's kind of like that, where you have different covens and houses, and they come out in their regallery and their finery and have a good time. So some of that has been lost. I don't see that um, being as widespread in the United States anymore. Um, there are still courts, but they've turned into more so kind of like these kind of big